Welcome to today's live session. Good evening, Facebook. Good evening, YouTube and Instagram. Okay, so today we're discussing 5 foundations for raising culture shifting children. Let's call this the part 3 in the series of raising culture shifting teens. So, what are those foundations that young people need if they are going to be influencers of culture and not be influenced by culture? In the first part of the conversation, we were talking about the fact that we are not just raising children, but we are raising young people who go into culture and influence culture. The fact that we are not just focused on raising well-behaved kids or good children, in quote. I made reference to that subject of the parable of the virgins, where we had 10 virgins, 5 of them were wise, 5 were rather foolish. And it's interesting to note that the foolish virgins ended up where I think that the non-virgins would also end up. I don't know what you think. All right. So you're welcome to this conversation. And if you're catching a replay, let me know that you are catching a replay on any of the platforms where you might be joining us from. Okay, I see a few persons and we can get going now. So essentially, we're talking about people who are powered by their convictions, not necessarily going to succumb to every trend, every vibe, and every other popular thing in society. We laid the background in the first part of this conversation, so you might want to go back to check. If you're catching a replay of this video, then the link to those sessions will be somewhere around the video or in the description of the video. Okay, so we talked about the likes of the Daniels, picking up from Bible history, the likes of the Daniels in Babylon, the Josephs in Egypt, the Esthers in is it Persia, I believe, yeah. So and then the Deborahs and those kind of persons. But and I have an entire study for teenagers on teenage characters from the Bible. That book is titled Teenagers of the Bible, so you may want to get a copy of it. There is volume 1, Teenagers of the Bible, volume 1, and Teenagers of the Bible, volume 2. So get the 2 volumes so that you can help your teenager do a bit more in-depth study on some of the characters that I have mentioned in this place. But they are examples of what we are discussing about what who a young person needs to be for them not to be easily swayed by peer pressure, easily swayed by social media pressure or whatever is trending and whatever is in vogue. Okay, these kinds of persons that will shift, make impact in culture have to be, first of all, rock solid in their own identities and their own inward culture. And that's how we started off on the conversation. A few things that you are going to find, even aside from the characters in the Bible, in contemporary and modern history, you're going to see a few examples. I mentioned in the first edition of our conversation somebody like Florence Nightingale, who was able to change an entire industry, the nursing sector, by her convictions, by her faith, by her understanding and passion for the job. It requires a certain level of character, strength, moral strength, and authority to be able to go into a sector and make an impact in that sector and not be counted as just one of the masses. All right. So if you have a character like that, in modern day history, you want to look at somebody like Strive Masiviwa in Zimbabwe. You want to look at a character like Nelson Mandela in South Africa. You want to look at somebody like Obiageli Obi Ezekwesili in Nigeria. You want to look at, there are so many other characters like that. The fact that it requires a certain level of conviction, identity, moral authority that a young person must develop at a young age if they are ever going to come out to be those kinds of persons that impact culture at any level. Okay, so I've identified a number of things that you find in each of these names I've mentioned. You find that they most often will be working in a hostile environment, but even in the midst of that hostility and the harshness of the environment where they work, they have a working relationship with God, aka they have a solid sense of spirituality, a solid sense of spirituality. mentioned on that list. And you can bring up any name that you think about, and we x-ray it and check. They have a sense of spirituality. I dare say, even those who are shifting culture in the negative sense, every one of them have working spirituality. All this idea of you are neither here nor there, it does not work if you're going to raise a young person who's going to make impact in their generation. And then there's something else about the fact that they are able to influence the system from within without compromising with the system. All right. Uh, they have this ability to stand for their values, to stand for what they believe in. Does your teenager know what it is that they believe in? And can they stand tall on that belief, irrespective of the opposition that they are inevitably going to face in culture? And then they have admirable wisdom, and wisdom that is solution oriented, not just wisdom is that can talk, not just wisdom that is oratorical, right? Not just the power of the gap, but they have that wisdom that brings solution. They have a certain sense of prophetic wisdom. I remember that in the first edition of our conversation, I talked about prophecy as a strategic means of communication, strategic mode of communicating direction, communicating vision, communicating values. Okay, then I've mentioned the fact that they are able to stand tall even where others are willing to bow, even where others are willing to bend. This set of human beings have their values cut out for them. Joseph will say things like, I cannot do this thing and sin against my God and against my master, Potiphar. They have that ability to stand strong, irrespective of the pressure or, in this case, enticement. They are able to stand for what it is that they believe in. Okay, and if all of those things are put in place, then it is only a natural consequence that they are able to rebuild broken cultures and set new standards for the young people in their generation. Joseph was 17, Esther was between that age, about that age. Who else is there? Daniel was 17, and the fugitive and the slave. All of them have these similarities in their stories. And so today, like I said, having set that background, we're going to look at 5 foundations for every young person who is going to shift culture, every young person who is going to set a new standard, every young person who is going to influence their peers and not be victims of peer pressure. And I'm going to do a countdown from 5 to 1. So I'm reversing the order now. Instead of giving you the 5 foundations from number 1 to number 5, we are going to count down from 5 to 1. So foundation number 5 is about mission orientation. Every young person, if your child is going to stand tall in their generation and resist peer pressure, that child must have a mission mindset. Mission mindset, vision, and mission. I use the word mission because it's purpose oriented. They live their lives with a higher purpose in mind. Your child is not just here to behave well, your child is here to bring solutions to society. Put that in the comment section, please. Your child is not just here to behave well. They are here to bring solutions to society. And so that young person at a very young age must have the orientation that I was born for a purpose. I am sent into culture. I am sent on a mission. You have to cultivate their awareness of that mission. You have to cultivate their awareness of that destiny, their awareness of that purpose. Things like, what are the popular causes that we have around? Injustice, suffering people, or economic transformation. Because when I speak with a few young persons, especially those who have a sense of spirituality and practicing their faith and all of that, when you talk to church teenagers, their whole idea of purpose is purpose to the less privileged, mission to the underserved communities, and that is valid, very, very valid. But there is also mission to the economic sector. There is also mission, like I mentioned, an example from the health sector. Maybe your assignment or the solution that you are going to bring is solution in medicine, or solution in governance, or solution in the economy, or solution in media, or solution in education, all right, or solution in entertainment. Even though I'm not always fast to go to entertainment because it's easy for everybody to have something they think they want to do in entertainment. But that particular sector is one place that drowns a lot of young people very easily. Okay, but if you're a young person has a sense of mission in that direction, they're going to require some level of training. Of course, the first level is about identifying what it is. The earlier you identify it, the earlier you can start training for it, the earlier you can start deploying for it. So, but the first foundation is a foundation of mission, that you are on an assignment into culture. When Joseph landed in Egypt, he knew for sure that he already had the dream from back home. Circumstances orchestrated it in such a way that he landed in this new place in the wrong circumstance, but he already had that dream. So I am here on an assignment. It is that vision, it is that mission that will keep them from compromise. It is that vision, that sense of mission that will keep them from attempting to cut corners. At some point, I'm hoping that we're going to treat the subject of identity, because mission is closely related to the identity of your child. I was speaking in the second edition, which was 2 days ago. By the way, this live session was supposed to be happening yesterday. We did everything we can to come live yesterday, but we had all the plenty setbacks, and so we are here today. So I was speaking to a young lady 2 days ago about the subject of identity, and we are able to define identity in about 4 or 5 different light expressions of that identity. So, as a family in your home, building that home environment, which is one of the things we discussed in the previous edition, building that home environment that supports this kind of identity, your family must also have that consciousness of a vision. We are here to serve. Let them learn how to serve from the home, which is where we talk about the fact that you need to be raising a young person who is not waiting for somebody to serve them, who is not waiting for somebody to come and rescue them, who is not waiting for somebody to come and bail them out from every circumstance where they find themselves. They are able to understand the idea of contribution and the idea of responsibility, that in whatever community, society, family, school, where you find yourself, you come there with a sense that I have a contribution to make to this place. That is where it begins. They need to develop a sense of responsibility, a sense of contribution. If you cannot make contribution in your father's house, you are not going to make contribution anywhere. If you cannot take responsibility for your toys and your room where you sleep, you're not going to be responsible for any other thing. It doesn't have to start from the high sounding things. It starts from the very little things. And I said 2 days ago that somebody was asking me, is my child not too young for this kind of conversation? I said the people who want to buy that child's destiny, they are not waiting for the child to grow up. In fact, the earlier they get it, the better for them. So your family will have to incorporate into that system, because, for instance, this is summer holidays, right? So for a lot of families and a lot of teenagers, you have the next 4 to 5 weeks of holiday. There has to be some form of contribution and responsibility. There has to be some form of contribution and responsibility within this. And depending on which part of the world where you live, some people have up to 2 months of holiday, okay, for summer break. So what are we going to be doing in those 2 months? As a family, you might want to take out 1 weekend or 2 in that break and engage in a form of service. You can do this at home, you can do this at church, you can do this in your neighborhood, and in so many other places as opportunity presents itself. That's the 5th foundation. Number 4 is the foundation of emotional resilience. The foundation of emotional resilience, that thing that will make your child be able to stand in fire and not be melted by the fire. Before they face that fire, you need to start teaching them how to walk through heat. Again, the bailout system must be broken in your home. The rescue system, this your helicopter parenting approach, must be cut away. Build their inner world. I talked about the heart of a culture shifter in our previous conversation. We talked about the home and the heart and the head, the mind of. I'll get there. I talked about the heart of a culture shifter. The heart of a culture shifter is built with confidence, is built with emotional strength, emotional maturity, is built with self-control. Is built with self-control. The wise King Solomon said, a man that cannot control his emotions is like a city without walls. And a young person who is a city without walls cannot shift anything. He's vulnerable. A city without walls is vulnerable to all kinds of attack. It's vulnerable to being shifted by anything that comes as a trend. So when we talk about self-control, we talk about controlling your emotions in whatever way they come. Emotions of love, emotions of anger, frustration, sadness. It's okay to feel the emotion, but how do you go ahead to express that emotion? Does your child have a vocabulary on how to express themselves without lashing out? Your boy child needs to understand how to regulate aggression, for instance, how to regulate frustration, and how not to transfer it to somebody else, and how not to transfer it to their fist and begin to beat people up. The foundation for emotional resilience includes allowing them learn to struggle, learn to face a difficult situation and solve it by themselves, learn to hit a roadblock on their journey and find a way out of it. A person who is going to shift culture is going to meet a lot of roadblocks. You are going to be mocked, you're going to be laughed at, you're going to be ridiculed, you're going to be dragged on the internet, you're going to be cancelled. And so, if you have not learned as a child how to manage difficult situations, it's not the day you show up on Twitter and they tell you that what you are saying is blah blah blah. Let them learn how to do that. Let them learn how to talk about. In the first part of this series, I mentioned that your home has to be a place where it's okay to discuss, have difficult conversations. Let them learn how to have difficult conversations. Let them learn how to talk about their pain, talk through their disappointment, to have conversations about failure with a sense of honesty and vulnerability. Let them learn how to walk through that in the home. It's preparation for difficult challenges in the future if you're going to shift anything, including let them learn how to pray through their difficult situations. We are not always going to be there. We are not always going to be there. So let them talk through that. Let them not suppress or exclude. Those are the two expressions that young people have for difficult emotions. They suppress it, they keep it inside, or they explode and lash out at anybody that talks to them immediately after that. Let them talk through it. Let them walk through it. Let them pray through it. Let them journal through it. Let them write through it. Let them have reflection moments around all of that. What is it that we find difficult and how can we handle it? Simple questions like that. Okay, so that's about emotional resilience. Number 3 is intellectual excellence. Here is where we talk about the mind of a culture shifter. Is that these guys must have the ability to think like reformers. At a young age, the young man Daniel was found 10 times better than his contemporary. Not just better in spirit, but better in skill, better in logic, better in understanding. And so, may our teenagers not fall for the scam of school and scam. Because the conversation around school and scam is catching on among a lot of young people. Understand the place of intellectual development, especially for people around here, very religious people. There's that subtle tendency for us to think that spirituality and intellectualism are two opposite poles that cannot come together. There's a tendency for a lot of very religious people to think like that. Don't just aim for perfection in spirituality as important as it is. Aim for perfection in intellect, in skill, in logic, in understanding. You need, and this is the foundation is even academics, but it goes way beyond academics. We're not just talking about academic success. We're not just talking about school success. We're talking about the fact that your child and your teenager needs to understand how to think, how to reason, how to create, how to articulate their thoughts. It's one thing to think and have excellent thoughts, but nobody can read your mind. So you must develop the skill of expressing that thought, whether in writing, in speaking, or in any other mode of communication that is available to you. That is intellectual excellence. So for some persons, they're better at writing than at speaking. For some persons, they're better at speaking than at writing. But communication is one of the most important skills that your teenager can learn. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The ability to communicate is one of the most important skills that your teenager can learn. So that they don't just get A's in school and fail at life. First class graduates that cannot defend themselves on an interview panel is a problem. First class graduates that cannot make a proper presentation and defend that presentation, or a proper proposal and defend that proposal in a presentation, has a problem. First class graduates that cannot have one-on-one communication, that is always offending people, they don't have one successful relationship, is a problem. That is a level of excellence that is beyond just, I know how to pass exams. Because there is a skill for passing exams. There is a skill for building relationships. Intellect is one of them. Emotional resilience is one of them, which we talked about in pillar number 4. So encourage curiosity. Encourage them to read books. Read books. Read books. Read books. I talked about it in the other video that at some point we achieve success at reading book, we also need to interrogate the content of what we are reading. You can learn a lot by watching videos, but we have to interrogate the content of what you're watching. Whether it is the comedy skits that are coming out of our entertainment industry, or you're watching something reasonable. Let them encourage intelligent spirituality. Encourage intelligent spirituality. Intelligent spirituality is the kind that acknowledges the power of God and the wisdom of God. That those two work hand in hand. We have a kind of religion in this part of the world that focuses on all the signs and wonders that the power of God can do without taking into cognizance the signs and wonders that the wisdom of God can do. I have a book on spiritual intelligence that I would encourage you as a parent to go and read. And I think Antetima has written also a book on the spiritually intelligent teenager. Your teenager should go and pick up those materials and read so that they are not blindly fooled by whatever it is that is coming out of fake religion. Let them wrestle with their thoughts. Let your home be the place where you encourage debate. Your parenting style cannot be that style that the reason why we do things in this house is because mommy and daddy said it. I understand the place of parental authority, but your children must have the ability and opportunity to challenge your thoughts and ideas in a respectful manner. Let's have debates. Let's role play debates where you can understand what is going on. I talked about media audit. Was it? I'm not sure in which of these sessions I was when I was talking about how to do media audits in your home. Let them wrestle with difficult questions. Questions in science, questions in the economy, questions in their politics, questions in their identity, questions about ethics, questions about faith. Let your home be a place where we can wrestle with some of these difficult conversations. The conversations that we cannot wrestle with in church. The conversations that we cannot wrestle with in school. Prepare your children for influence in places like governance, like technology, like health, art, education. These are the places you want to go and shift culture. Shifting culture is not only by dancing and raising up your hand. Shifting culture is by going into the places that matter and being able to have conversations on an intellectual level and providing wise solutions to the problems there. That's how we're going to prepare the generation that can do this. Books, I talk about videos, documentaries, the kind of games that you play in your house. Is it logic or just all of these games that lure teenagers into immorality? There are a lot of them. What kind of church do you attend? You attend churches where the only thing they do every Sunday is where people are vomiting coins and vomiting bread. Or they go to a place where something is challenged in their thought, something is challenged in their spirit, something is challenged in their vision for life. Foundation number 2, lasting longer than I thought. Foundation number 2 is the foundation of moral clarity. I talked about in the beginning that every young person who we have studied has that thing about moral fortitude. Beyond just knowing right from wrong, knowing wise from foolish. Knowing wise from foolish. Beyond just knowing good and bad. All things are lawful, but not all things are expedient. So that conversation has gone a little bit above good and bad. We're not talking about, is it necessary for where I am going in life? Is it necessary for the agenda that I have? Is it necessary for the vision and the mission that I carry? Train them to develop strong values, not just vague standards. How do you discern what is true from what is trending? If you have observed your social media, there's always one new thing trending at least every 2 weeks. There's always one new thing trending. How do you discern? How do you not get carried away by every new trend every 2 weeks? How do you not get carried away by that? Again, here you're going to need to employ a lot of auditing, audit events, audit media, audit things that happen in your life. Develop their conviction. That moral authority is something that can be developed. And you don't develop it by enforcing compliance to rules and regulations. I said at the beginning of this conversation that culture shifting and the young people that are going to do that are going to be raised beyond the boundaries of rules and regulations. You're going to need rhythms that empower moral authority, moral clarity. We have to understand this thing that we're believing, not just because everybody believes it. Not just because everybody believes it. Is understanding the way Coach Wendy will say it is that the person that knows why is better, 1,000 times better than the one who just knows how. Those who know why will always lead over those who just know what and how. Why do we make these choices? It's a more serious question than is it a good choice or a bad choice? Because teenagers will always question, is it wrong? Is it bad? What if? What about? What about this other person? And you're always going to find one exception that you can point to for an excuse to do what you want to do. You're always going to find one exception. You're going to find one example. What about this person? What about the other family? Did you not do it like this? No. When you understand your why, you have very little confusion around what and how. So that foundation, the foundation of moral clarity, the foundation of moral excellence, is very, very important to building a life that is counterculture and can shift culture. The last or the first foundation is the foundation of spiritual depth. This is where the conversation of identity comes in. I'm not talking about religion here. I'm talking about your spiritual roots as a family. Culture shifters are not people who just know about God. They are people who know God personally. Culture shifters don't just know about. It's one thing to know about Chedozie. It's another thing to know Chedozie in person. So the same way, it's one thing to know about God, and it's another thing to know God personally. We're doing an email series on this conversation about rhythms and culture shifting. So if you're on our email channel on our or WhatsApp channel, you're going to have access to all of the conversations that we have more time to accommodate. But creating daily rhythms of spirituality in your home is one of the things that you must make. You must teach sensitivity and discernment. Discernment is one of those skills that your teenager cannot do without in the 21st century. The skill of discernment. It takes practice. It takes learning to be able to discern in this world where so many things are trending. In the world of AI, where somebody can clone this my video and say an entirely different thing from what it is I'm doing now. How do you discern which one is right and which one is wrong? You're going to need a lot of it in this generation. From childhood, it's not the day, that day that Daniel rejected the food from the king's palace. It's not that day he started preparing for that. It's that a certain kind of discipline has been built in the young man, and the day he showed up in Babylon was the test day, and it was a day for manifestation. So spiritual disciplines must be trained from foundation. Again, I asked this question at the Tiapiana conference. Why is it that your child has finished Vampire Diaries and they have not finished reading the New Testament? Why? Spiritual disciplines are not going to be trained in adulthood. They have to be trained from childhood. And encouraging the use of spiritual gifts. I said in our previous session that your spiritual gift is designed for solutions in culture. It's not designed so that your mates in university can be calling you Papa and Mama. And then you'll be looking for PA that will serve you in school. Two of you came to school to learn. But now you're Papa, now you're Mama. That's not what your spiritual gift is meant for. Your spiritual gift is meant for you to bring solution to that school environment, to the student union body, to the laboratories and the research sections of that school. That's where your spiritual gift is needed, not inside fellowship house. But all of these things have to be cultivated with intentionality. It's not the day your child shows up in the university that they're going to receive these trainings. It is a preparation for the culture. We said they are not trained to be preserved from the system. They are prepared to get into that place and make an impact. So now your child is going to the university, and the only advice you have for them is when you go to school, don't join bad gang, don't follow all these bad girls. So that is because they had never been prepared for the environment where they were going. And that's it. I've given you 5 foundations for young people who are going to change or shift culture. It's more than just a formula. We started off by talking about the fact that this is a blueprint issue, a design, a burden, a call on every parent to release into society children who are prepared for culture. So 5 of them. Number 1 is spiritual depth, identity. Moral clarity is number 2. Number 3 is intellectual excellence. Number 4 is emotional resilience. And number 5 is a life that is mission oriented. These are the characteristics of a culture shifter. They are layers that you have to build in the life of your teenager, and you're going to need help. That is why mentorship is required. That is why influence is required beyond your own influence. And you, as a parent, get into an accountability system. God did not give you your children by accident. There's also a mission on the life of the parent to raise for us that Daniel in Babylon, raise for us that Joseph in Egypt, that Esther in Persia, that Mary. All right. There's also a call. There's also a mission for the parents to do that. So let me hear from you. Which of these 5 foundations are you building? Which one is the strongest in your family, or which one is the weakest that you're going to begin to work on? All right, so get all of the resources. I've mentioned the number of resources in this whole conversation, from the ones that are written by me in the academy. I've mentioned some other resources from a number of other coaches and mentors, and you can find a lot of them available. So reach out to us, get into a mentor, get your teenager into a mentorship system. Our bootcamp is starting in less than, I think it's about 8 or 9 days from today, and so you can still join us between today and tomorrow before we shut down registrations. Join the academy for 2026. We are more than delighted to have you there. And if you're watching us on YouTube, feel free, please subscribe, follow on Instagram and Facebook and all of those places. And I will see you again in the next conversation. Thank you very much.